Welcome to Daily English Stories. Every story hides a world. Some inspire, some haunt, some stay forever.
Chapter 1. Lessons from Failure and Simplicity. Ethan Carter often said that his life had not been a straight road, but a winding path full of broken stones, sudden turns, and unexpected dead ends. He was not born into privilege, nor did fortune smile upon him in his early years. He grew up in a small neighborhood where opportunities were scarce, and dreams often felt too heavy to carry. Yet, within that ordinary life, Ethan discovered the extraordinary truth about failure, simplicity, and happiness. He remembered the first time he failed. He was 12, standing in front of his classmates, trying to read a passage out loud. His voice trembled. The words slipped from his mind, and laughter filled the room. That moment carved itself deep into his heart. For years, failure became a shadow that followed him. He failed at exams, failed in sports, failed in relationships, and failed in business ventures that collapsed before they even started. Each time he stumbled, the world seemed to point and laugh, just as his classmates once did. But Ethan also remembered what his father used to say: "A man is not measured by how many times he falls, but by how many times he chooses to rise." Those words became his shield, though it took him years to understand them. When Ethan grew older, he believed success meant wealth. He worked harder than anyone else, chasing after promotions, gathering money, and trying to prove that he was not a failure. He thought expensive suits, fine dinners, and a luxurious apartment would bring him happiness. But the more he achieved, the emptier he felt. He realized that success, when it was only about possessions, was nothing more than an illusion, a beautiful mask hiding loneliness. It was during one of his lowest moments that Ethan found himself sitting in the park on a quiet evening. The world felt heavy on his shoulders, and he wondered if all his struggles had any meaning. There he met an old man sitting on a worn wooden bench. The man wore simple clothes, his shoes were patched, and his hands looked rough from years of labor. Yet his eyes carried a light that Ethan had never seen in anyone before. The old man smiled and offered Ethan a piece of bread he had been eating. It was nothing fancy, just plain bread wrapped in paper. But there was kindness in the gesture. They spoke for hours. The old man told Ethan about his life, how he had worked in factories, raised children, and never owned much. Still he laughed easily, spoke with peace, and carried no bitterness. "Do you know why I'm happy?" the old man asked. Ethan shook his head. "Because I stopped searching for happiness in places it never lived." Happiness is not hidden in wealth or luxury. It lives in simple things: the laughter of children, the warmth of the sun, the smell of fresh bread. The truth is, happiness is not something you find, it's something you create. Those words struck Ethan like lightning. He had spent years climbing ladders that leaned against the wrong wall. He thought happiness was a prize at the end of a race. But now he saw it was present in small, ordinary moments that he had overlooked. From that day, Ethan began to change. He slowed down. Instead of rushing past life, he started noticing it. He found joy in morning walks, in conversations with strangers, in the sound of rain tapping against his window. Failure no longer scared him, because he realized that falling was part of being alive. Every failure carried a lesson, and every lesson shaped his strength. He began to see that simplicity was not weakness, but power. To live simply meant to live freely, without being chained to endless desires. It was not about having nothing. It was about needing less. Ethan realized that the richest people were not those who had the most, but those who needed the least. Looking back, Ethan often said that meeting the old man in the park was the turning point of his life. He did not know the man's name, nor did he ever see him again, but the wisdom stayed with him. He carried it into every decision, every failure, and every new beginning. And so, Ethan Carter learned his first truth about life. Failure is not the end. It is a teacher. And happiness is not found in wealth. It is created in simplicity. Chapter 2. The Weight of Choices. Ethan Carter often said that life is not defined by the thunder of grand achievements, but by the quiet whispers of small decisions. Looking back, he realized that it wasn't the big moments, the promotions, the celebrations, or the failures, that truly shaped him. It was the little choices made in silence that carved the deepest lines into his soul. In his youth, Ethan believed choices were simple. Success was the road, and everything else was a distraction. He worked tirelessly, saying yes to every demand from his employers, yes to every late night at the office, and yes to a life that slowly began to consume him. But with each yes, he unknowingly said no to other things. The laughter of friends he no longer had time for, the family dinners he missed, the quiet evenings he once spent with his own thoughts. At first he told himself it was worth it. Success required sacrifice, and he believed he was building a future where happiness would be waiting for him at the finish line. But the years went by, and Ethan noticed the silence of his apartment growing heavier. Friends who had once stood close drifted away, tired of unanswered calls. A woman he once loved left, not because she stopped caring, but because she could not compete with the endless demands of his ambition. Ethan never stopped her. He told himself he had no choice. But deep down, he knew he had made a choice. Regret was something Ethan carried like a stone in his pocket, heavy and always present. He remembered the night he chose work over attending his sister's wedding. He told himself it was only one day, that she would understand. But when he saw the photographs months later, her smile radiant, her eyes filled with joy, he felt a sharp emptiness knowing he had not been there to witness it. Success had cost him moments he could never buy back. Yet not all choices were painful. Some, though small, brought him unexpected clarity. Once, while rushing to an important meeting, Ethan stopped to help an old woman carry her groceries across the street. It delayed him, and he lost the chance to impress a potential client. But years later, when he recalled that day, he didn't remember the lost deal. He remembered the woman's smile, the simple gratitude in her eyes, and the warmth it left in his heart. That small choice had no price tag, but it carried more meaning than any business victory he ever celebrated. Through time, Ethan began to understand that choices are not measured by their size, but by their weight. Some are light, forgotten as quickly as they are made. Others settle into the soul, heavy with consequence, teaching lessons that last a lifetime. He also realized something more painful, that often the pursuit of approval had guided his decisions. He wanted to be admired, respected, and seen as someone who had made it in life. In chasing the applause of others, he lost the sound of his own voice. He chose their expectations over his truth, and in doing so, he drifted further from the man he was meant to become. One evening, while journaling in the quiet of his room, Ethan wrote a line that became etched in his heart. Every choice is a thread, and together they weave the fabric of our lives. Some threads are bright, others dark, but all are part of the same tapestry. It was then he understood that regret and wisdom often walk hand in hand. He could not undo the past, nor could he erase the pain of the wrong turns he had taken. But he could learn. He could honor the truths hidden within those choices, no matter how bitter they felt. Ethan began to live more deliberately. Instead of asking, "What will others think of this choice?" he asked, "Will this choice bring me peace? Will this choice reflect who I truly am?" He learned that the weight of choices was not something to fear, but something to respect. For within that weight lived truth, and within truth the seed of wisdom. And so Ethan carried forward, humbled by the past, but no longer chained to it. The mistakes, the regrets, the broken relationships, they were not signs of failure. They were teachers, whispering the lesson he had once ignored. Life is not waiting at the end of the road. It is being built, choice by choice, moment by moment, in the quiet decisions we make every day. Chapter 3. Finding the Real Treasure. Ethan Carter sat quietly on the same weathered park bench where, years earlier, an old man had first told him that happiness was not something you find, but something you create. The air was cool, and the laughter of children echoed in the distance, filling the park with a melody that seemed far more valuable than the sound of applause in any boardroom he had once chased. Looking back, Ethan realized he had spent most of his life running after shadows, wealth, recognition, and the approval of others. He had built a name in his profession, earned titles that impressed strangers, and accumulated possessions he once thought would make him whole. But none of it filled the empty spaces inside him. Those things glittered on the outside, but they never warmed his soul. It was only after losing much, relationships, moments, and even parts of himself, that he finally saw what mattered. True treasure was never hidden in the numbers of a bank account or the shine of a new car. It was found in places most people overlooked, in laughter shared over a simple meal, in the comfort of a hand held during a difficult moment, in the quiet peace of knowing you had shown kindness when it was needed most. He remembered his mother's gentle smile, her voice reminding him that love was the only thing that grew the more you gave it away. He remembered his sister's wedding, the one he had missed, and how regret had carved a lesson deep inside him. No amount of success was worth the memories you could never recreate. And he remembered the old man in the park, whose wisdom he had once listened to but only now fully understood, that the truth about life was not about collecting achievements, but about leaving behind moments of love and compassion. Ethan thought of forgiveness, too, something he had long resisted. For years he had carried bitterness toward people who had betrayed or hurt him. He had carried anger at himself for the choices he wished he could undo. But forgiveness, he realized, was not about excusing the past. It was about freeing himself from the chains of it. By forgiving others, he let go of the burden they had placed on his heart. By forgiving himself, he allowed healing to finally enter. Forgiveness was not weakness, it was courage, the kind of courage that allowed him to breathe again. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky with shades of orange and gold, Ethan found himself smiling at the simple beauty before him. Life was short, he knew. But within that shortness was something profound. Every smile given, every kind word spoken, every act of love, these were treasures no thief could steal and no time could erase. He looked around the park. A young couple walked past, holding hands tightly, their laughter floating like music. An elderly man helped a little boy tie his shoelaces. Strangers exchanged nods and polite smiles. And in that ordinary scene, Ethan saw extraordinary truth. Connection was the heart of life. People, not possessions, were the measure of wealth. He leaned back, closed his eyes, and whispered to himself, "This is it. This is the real treasure." It wasn't the awards that once gathered dust in his office. It wasn't the long-forgotten applause of those who had praised his work. It was love given and love received, kindness shared, and gratitude lived day by day. When Ethan finally stood to leave the park, he carried no gold, no titles, and no possessions. But he carried something greater, the quiet certainty that he had found the truth about life. He knew that when his own story came to an end, it would not be measured by what he had earned, but by the memories he had left in the hearts of others. And in that realization, he was finally rich.